So we'll be watching the red team, the red number 1. She doesn't move early, but when she does turn, she goes to the other team's side. The ball's not in her area. She doesn't mark up somebody like she's supposed to. That's the person right there, gray 1, that she should have been marking up. And then as other people miss it, now she's actually marking the gray 1 up like she should be, and is able to pick up the ball casually with him right beside her. The red number 2 turns out, doesn't move early, but does turn out as the ball passes her up. She also doesn't mark somebody up. The person she doesn't mark up had a chance to pick up the ball, but misses it, or just knocks it forward. Has another chance to pick it up. Still not going all out for the ball just then, but he does cause her to miss it. And the number 3 is turning early, but is turning in. That's bad. And then she doesn't ride him, the other 3, off the ball. She tries to pick it up herself. He knocks it out of her racket or keeps her from picking it up. And then after she picks it up, she has those other problems. Okay, the red number 1 does go across the other team's side. The ball's not in her area, and she does not mark anybody up. The other team rides each other off the ball so they don't pick it up, and she's just hanging out, so the red 1 does. Now the red number 2, the ball passes her up and she turns out like she's supposed to. That's good. Ball's not in her area, and she does not mark anybody up. She actually rode past it without taking. And the number 3 doesn't start turning quite early enough, does turn out, and it went off to the other team's side, but since the other team turned in, she had plenty of time to get there, and she did keep their first in line from.
Anderson's going to throw the ball in. Throws it right down the middle. Paige had it in her racket. She throws it out front for herself. Couldn't handle it. And Daisy's going to try picking up the ball.
Okay, the red 1 we're watching this time. She does, I think she maybe even had the ball for a second, but does go to the other side and then misses that pickup with nobody beside her, and did not take that opposing player with past the ball, but the opposing player was so far away, also passed the ball up, so I guess she did her job. Okay, we're watching the red number 2 this time. The ball doesn't pass her up. She doesn't turn out. When she goes towards the other team's side, she doesn't pick up a player right away, and then when she gets up against a player, now when she's first in line for the ball, she doesn't seem to be going all out to keep that player from picking it up. And so the red number 3 we're looking at, it started to turn out, but then I would have preferred that they continued turning all the way around and coming around and picking up that 3 on the other side out the back.
Up nicely. Yes, there it is. There it is. Goes in. Tally has a swat at it. Paige has a hit. And she.
Okay, we're watching the red number 1 this time. She doesn't move early, and she actually went for the ball. Actually was going to be turning left rather than going around to her area. Now we're watching the number 2. The number 2 doesn't turn early. I mean, she's turning early, but she's turning in, which is wrong. Then the ball is in her area, and she picks it up. So she actually, after she made the wrong turn, she did correctly. The number 3 is kind of in front of her, but she slapped at it anyhow. After she missed it and knocked it over to the 2's area, she didn't look back for the number 3 to mark up the other player.
Ball goes in right down the middle, down to the blue side. Oh, there's 4 people went for it. Couldn't handle it.
Okay, we'll watch the blue number 1. She goes to the other team's side. It's not in her area, and then she does not look back and mark up another player. After other people miss it and she's first in line for it, since she didn't mark anybody up, she's out of position to go in to pick it up. And the number 2 on the blue team, the ball passes her up, she does turn out just like she's supposed to. She doesn't mark somebody up right away, she's still looking up at the ball, but she is close to them and they missed it. I don't think it's because of her, but she did her job because she caused them to miss it. So the number 3, she doesn't turn early, but she does turn out, and then she does get up in there and kind of push the other 3 away to keep the 3 from picking up. She actually did her job pretty well.
Getting ready to throw the ball in, throws it right down the middle, wants to touch it, but nobody catches it. Livy had a shot, Janelle had a shot, Stephanie had a shot, Heather.
Okay, we'll watch the blue number 1. She doesn't turn early. Kind of the same thing she did last time. She kind of slaps at the ball and then goes around looking for it. After it wasn't in her area, she never looked for anybody else, but since everybody else missed it, she did pick it up. The number 2 turns in, and just because she's turned in puts her behind the opposing number 2 to be going after the ball. Fortunately, the other 2 misses it, gives her a chance to pick it up, but she misses it. And then the blue 3 turns very slowly out and then just doesn't try to go towards the ball at all and it's just out of the play.
Ball goes way out the back.
We're watching the blue number 1. She doesn't turn early, but she does get to her area. Still not, it wasn't in her area, and she wasn't really looking for anybody, but it's caught pretty quick. The blue number 2 turns out, turns right, is up against somebody, but the ball's caught right away. Now the opposing 3 just turned better and earlier, getting over to the other team's side and gets the ball. We're going to play this again.
Ball goes right down the middle, Racket's on top of it.
Okay, the red number 1 goes to her area like she's supposed to, but then doesn't turn around and mark up a player, and that is the player that ends up picking up the ball. The red number 2 did her job. Ball's in her area, she turns out, she goes to the ball, is first to it, and causes the other number 2 to miss the ball. The red number 3 also did her job. She turns out, didn't turn early, but she did turn out, and then when the ball's not there, she marks up another player and causes that other player to pass up the ball.
And then the ball goes in right down the middle. And the first one on is going to be Tally Thompson. She misses it. Everybody misses it except for Liz.
We're watching the red number 1. First of all, she turned in, but didn't go to the other team's side. The ball's not in her area, and she does not mark up another player. And the red number 2 turns out like she's supposed to. The ball's not in her area, and she's really still heading for the ball and not looking to mark up another player. And it is that player that she doesn't mark up that ends up picking up the ball. And the red number 3 doesn't turn early and turns in, so she's going to be behind, and she reaches out there she gets to the ball first and then misses it, but doesn't cause the other number 3 to ride past it. Now the blue 1 does her job. The ball goes down, batted down, and is in her area. She went across her area and picks it up, just like she's supposed to. Blue number 2 kind of did her job. Ball doesn't come to her area. She turns out, but then she doesn't immediately start riding somebody off, but the ball's picked up right away. And the blue number 3 didn't continue turning on around. That's what I wish she would have done. It would have been on the other side of the 3, marking her up better on that play.
Tosses the ball in, flips it out the back. Livy's looking to be the first one on top of it, tries making it up, picking it up, couldn't handle it, has her.
Okay, the blue 1, the ball's, she kind of goes to her area. The ball's not in her area, but she does not look back to mark somebody up. This time, she just happens to be in the place already when it comes loose to the other player where she's able to get it. If she had been riding that other one off, she could have got it more casually still. Blue number 2 turns out correctly. Looks like she isn't going all out there to get in front of that number 2 to mark her up. And then the blue number 3 this was in her area. She does not turn early, and so she's behind the whole time, and the black number 3 actually does miss it, but she had an opportunity to pick it up. The blue number 3 I don't think was going all out for it.
Doing a very good job. Shot the back, Livy comes up.
Okay, the blue number 1 turns out and then doesn't look to mark up another player. The blue number 2 turns in, which is probably wrong. Gets her horse behind the other horse. Can't tell if she's marking somebody up or trying to mark up because she's behind. And the blue number 3 just lets the black number 3 turn quicker than her. She starts her turn too slower and is slower getting back to it.
Umpire Cody Christopher throws a hard one straight into the middle of them. Goes all the way out the back. Tally misses it. Paige misses it. Oh, Renee misses it. Kiki's going to be on top of it. Kiki needs to get out of the way.
Okay, we'll watch the red 1. She goes to the other team's side. The ball's not in her area, and she doesn't mark anybody up. And then she assumes her 3 is going to get it, so she takes on towards the goal, and 3 doesn't get it. So she should have been marking somebody up to keep the other team from picking it up. The red number 2 turns in for some reason. That's wrong. And then it doesn't look like she's marking somebody up, but she actually is. She's actually beside them, marking them up towards the ball, just like she should have been. And then for some reason misses it. And when she missed it, she passed up the person that was next to her. So she should have slowed down a little bit more before she tried to make the pickup to take that other player with her. Now the red 3 is first to it, even though it's well onto the other team's side, and just misses an easy pickup. After she missed it, she doesn't mark anybody up like she should till she's first in line again, and really just doesn't do much of anything after that.
The ball goes down. Tally goes for it. Has first shot on it. Misses it. Renee's going to turn back on it. Paige is going to see it. She's got some.
Okay, we'll watch the red 1. She goes to her pointed to her other side for just a second, but then lets herself get pushed back to her own side. The ball's over there, and she doesn't immediately mark up another player, which is a problem. After a while, she does get up against that other 3 there. I guess that could have kept her from picking it up, then turns back and picks it up herself. The number 2, this is one that could have been the number 2 area or the number 3 area. I would have figured it as close to the number 2, but the 3 goes for it and misses it, and when Well, let's talk about the 2. The 2 missed it and caused another player to ride past it. So the 2 did okay, did her job. After she passed it, she did mark somebody up, but up until then, she did doing her job. The number 3, I would have said this was probably the 2's ball, but the 3 could go for it. But when she did, of course she missed it, and she did not take an opposing player with her. So she did not do her job. Okay, here's one where the front 2 players actually do correct. Front number 1, red, goes to her side. The ball bounced right over there where since she had gotten there, she just reached over and picked it up. The number 2 turns toward, doesn't turn out because it didn't pass her up, and stands there holding somebody off till the other person gets somebody. The number 3 just didn't turn early. Didn't matter in that particular instance, though. We're watching the blue team. The blue number 1 turns the wrong way. The ball goes to her side where she should have been first to it, but there's no way she could have been first to it because she turned the wrong way. The number 2 turns in, also incorrect. And the number 3 also turns in, incorrect.
You're going to get the ball in, line up, it goes out, almost out the back. Stephanie comes up with...
This time we'll be watching the blue team. The blue number 1 takes a long time to start her turn and get to the other area, and the ball was in her where she should have been first to it for her team. Since she was so slow getting there, the number 2 went to do her job for her, moved over to that area rather than marking somebody off to let the first one go. So the number 2 actually makes a good thing out of a bad situation that the number 1 should have gotten. The number 3, of course, it didn't stay back that far, but the blue number 3 is not turning her horse on her hind end, so her horse's back end stepped out about 5 feet from where it started to make that turn.
We've got time on. We've got to throw in. It's off the black.
This time we'll watch the black team, and the black number 1 doesn't go to his area. All the black 3 are just black players turned out. The black 2 player goes to his area, and he just reaches down and picks it up, just like he should have. The black 3 starts to turn out, and then sees his player get it, so he did all right too.
Okay, my scorekeeper is keeping me in line here. The score is 1-1. It's not 2-0.
Okay, the black number 1. He does go to the other team side like he's supposed to, but he didn't move there early. And then after the ball's not in his area, he doesn't mark somebody up. Actually, I guess he could technically be marking up that orange player that's behind him, so I guess the number 1 probably did all right, except for not getting to his area quicker. The number 2 turns out, the ball passes him up, going to the back, and then he doesn't mark up a player since he's not first in line for the ball. And then the black number 3 turns early, should be first to the ball easily because the other player turned in. The only thing is, when he missed the ball, and he got to it first and had first shot at it, but when he missed it, he batted it out there where the player he was riding against didn't pass it up and was able to get the ball.
We've got time on. We've got to throw in. It's out the back. The number 3's turn on it, and who's going to be first to it? It's still on the ground, man.
Okay, we're watching the team with white helmets. The white number 1 goes to her side, then isn't looking to mark somebody else up right away, is kind of just going towards the ball, and then when she sees the ball, goes on after it. After the 3's marked up, passed it up, she could have been first to it. The number 2 turned out like they're supposed to. The ball's not in her area, and you don't really see her going up there to mark up that player that's kind of in front of her like she should have been doing. and if she had been, she would have been next in line for the ball, and that her teammate wouldn't have had to jump out there and try to get it. And then the 3 is turning early, turns out, that's all good, and is first to the ball, and causes the other number 3 to miss the ball. So the number 3 did her job.
And for the second jumper, we have a throw in, and it comes up in Rachel Gaylor, the orange number.
We're watching the black team. The black number 1 goes to the other side, but he's slow about getting there and doesn't beat the other team to the ball. The black number 2 turns in, even though the ball had passed him up. That's wrong. And then when it's not in his area, you don't see him going up there to mark anybody up. Now the other team's got it and he needs to do something else. And the black number 3 also turns in, also wrong. And he didn't start turning early. He had been before, but this time he just stood there waiting for the ball to come in.
And the throw in bounces off the brackets, goes off to the black side, and Braxton's going to have a go. He just knocked it back into Daniel's racket. Daniel.
Okay, the black number 1 stood there, waited till the ball comes in, then does turn toward his area. Once it's past him, he didn't mark somebody else up. The black number 2 starts to turn in, bats it down to his area where he should have got it. If he was turning out, he would have been right to it. And he does end up picking it up and passing it off. The black number 3 starts turning early, but then turns back to go after the ball, even though it's in his number 2's area, and ends up missing it and not taking a player with him when he missed it.
There's the throw out the back. The player spin the number 3. Rachel Gaylor comes.
The black number 1 does not go to the other team's side, and if he had gone to the other team's side, the ball's going out the back. He would be coming up on the left side of that white horse, as his 3 was on the right side, and they would have her pretty well caught. The number 2 turns out, it passed him up, and then after it passed him up, he may be marking somebody up, so that's okay. And the number 3 started turning early, but lets her beat him to the ball. And then when she batted it out there, instead of getting up against her and pushing her off the ball, he stayed off and tried for the ball, but she got it.
Looks like Rachel may be first to it. Rachel goes down and she's got it.
We're watching the black team. Black number 1 goes to his other side, kind of casually, and he's not really looking for somebody to mark up, which is a problem. The black number 2 turns in for some reason. That's wrong. And he also doesn't try to mark somebody up. He lets a player pass him up to go after the ball instead of marking him up. And the black number 3 turns early, turns out, but once again, that orange number 3 is going to beat him to the ball and pick it up.
We've got a throw in. We've got time on. Off to the black side, but Grace slipped through and got first call on it. But
Watching the team with the white helmets. So the white number 1, although she goes kind of slow, she does go to the other team's side, and that's where the ball is. I don't know why she got behind that other player, but she does get first go at the ball. And misses it, ends up riding it off. No other players are with her, and her player ends up taking it up. And the white number 2 turns in for some reason, and also does not mark up another player. And the white number 3 doesn't turn out, doesn't turn early, ends up turning in, going for the ball, which probably was not in her area. Of course, her number 2 is way back. Not getting it. Oh, that'd have been the number 1. Should have been coming up there to get it. But anyhow, even though still, she never has marked up another player either.
And it's off to the white side. Olivia rides over it. Both.
The team with white helmets, the white number 1. Turns out nobody on the white team went to the other team's side, and the white player kind of went to back up her number 3 and did ride an opposing player off, so the white one did her job. The white number 2, the ball passes her up, she turns out, that's right, but when those other players are going for it, she doesn't reach back, look back, and pick up a player to mark. And then when the player right beside her is trying to pick it up, she's not going all out to keep them from picking it up. The white 3, the ball goes past her, she turns out, and she's first to it, and just misses the ball.
Okay, we've got the timer set. We've got time on. We've got to throw in. It's off to the orange side. Rachel may be first to it. Yeah.
We're watching the black team. The number 1 does get to his area. Ball's not in his area, and he doesn't look back to mark anybody up. Their other team gets it pretty quick, though. The black number 2 passes him up. It turns out that's correct. It's not in his area, and he also doesn't look back to mark up another player. And the black number 3 starts his turn about right, does turn out, but still lets that girl on the white horse beat him to the ball.
There, we've got time on. We've got to throw in this time.
The black team, the black number 1, turns out for some reason. Nobody goes to the other team's side, and almost challenges his own number 2 for the ball that's in the 2's area. The black number 2 turns out. There's the ball right in his area. He just picks it up. And the black number 3 started turning early. The ball's not up there, and instead of staying back and marking up 3, he started up there as if to go after the ball.
Then the lineup goes off to the orange side, and it is.
Okay, the black team, the black number 1, once again is very slow getting to his area. You might watch him and watch how long he waits before he tells his horse to start moving towards that area. The black number 2 turns in and not to mark up another player. And the black number 3 starts his turn out, and the ball is kind of caught right away, so he did okay. We're watching the red number 1. She's trying to get to her area, That's good, trying to get to her area. And then the ball happens to get kicked out in her area. She challenges the orange 3 for it and keeps them from picking up the ball, so the number 1 did her job just correctly. The number 2 turned out, even though the ball hadn't passed him up. It's in his area. It's not in his area, and he's not marking up another player. And the ball gets kicked around again, and this time he may be marking up another player, so his player out front can get it. And the number 3 starts to turn out and early, but then turns back. I always want them to turn completely around before turning back if the ball doesn't make it out that far. As it turns out, the ball gets kicked out in front of her while she wasn't marking anybody up, and she picks it up. We're going to watch the blue team, number 1. Turns out nobody from the blue team went to the other team's side. When the ball is not in her area, she does not mark up another player. She should have marked up that number 1 that's just passing her up right there. And as it turns out, that's the number 1 that picks up the ball for the other team. The number 2 turns out, and the ball is kind of in her area, or it could be the 3s. She says the 3 going for it, so she does actually look back and pick up another player just like she's supposed to. Since nobody else was holding the black 1 off, the black 1 picks it up by herself for us easy. The number 3 decides that's in her area enough and goes for it. She's first to it. The only thing is she missed it and did not take another player past the ball with her.
The ball is down. Missed.
We're watching the blue number 1. Turns out nobody from the blue team went to the other team's side, and then the blue number 1 does not mark up a player towards the ball. The blue number 2 passes the ball, passes her up. She turns out like she's supposed to. It's not in her area. She should pick up another player. It looks like she may be picking up another player, and then she is first in line for the ball and picks up the ball. The blue number 3 doesn't start her turn early, but she does turn out and makes the opposing 3 ride past the ball. So the number 3 did her job. We'll be watching the red team with the blue player, and this time the play works out as if all the players were doing the right things. The blue number 1 goes to the other team's side, but he doesn't really mark up a player when the ball's not in his area. He does, though, once everybody else has passed it up, is marking up that player and gets to it like he's supposed to. The red number 2 turns out the ball's not in her area. She does look back for another player and stays between them and the ball, so that's good for a while. When she's first to it, she wasn't really riding him off very effectively, but he did miss it, so she gets credit for making him miss the ball. So she did her job correctly. The red number 3 turns out could have been earlier, and this white horse has been beating everybody out the back, but the red 3 challenged her enough that caused her to miss the pickup, so she did her job, and her team ends up with the ball.
The ball is down. Rachel gets the ball.
Watching the red team with the blue player, the blue number 1 turns out. Nobody from the red team went to the other team's side, and that's where the ball is. So there was nobody from the red team to keep them from picking it up. The red number 2, ball passes her up. She turns out, and then does she look back and mark up a player once the ball's not in her area? She is marking him up, so she's doing her job. And the red number 3, she starts her turn early, turns out. That time the ball didn't really pass her up, goes to the other team's side. Her player wasn't there to get it, so they lose the ball. Okay, we're watching the blue number 1. He goes to the other team's side, and it looks like he doesn't mark up a player, but since his number 2 isn't marking up that orange player in the middle, it's appropriate for him to go after that player. He did mark him up, push him off just before he got to the ball. The number 2 does turn out, but then doesn't pick up a player. She should pick up the orange number 1 behind her. And the number 3 turns out a whole lot slower than the number 3 on the orange team, and the orange team got way to the ball a lot closer, and I'm just not sure why she missed it.
Time is on.
Okay, we'll watch the blue number 1. Turns out nobody from the blue team went to the other team's side, then isn't looking for somebody, but her player gets it right away. The blue number 2 turns out like she's supposed to, and also doesn't look for another player to mark up. The blue number 3 wasn't turning early, did turn out, and got to the ball first like she's supposed to, but the opposing number 3 just her horse wasn't anywhere near the game. Okay, here's one where everybody on the blue team does it wrong, but they still end up with the ball, mainly because the black number 3's horse won't let her get near the play. Okay, the number 1 turns out. I don't know if that was her plan. The other 2 players went in, but if that her plan would have probably been to go around to the front, and she should have been first to the ball on her team. Number 2 turns in. That's wrong. Actually pulls her horse across somebody else's hind end, and once she misses it, she does kind of get up against somebody while her 3 is getting it, so that part was good on her part. The number 3 starts to turn out, but then turns back in to go for the ball, where I would have preferred she continued turning all the way around and came up and got it, and I would have preferred that the 1 had come around to get that ball from the front. Okay, the blue 1 doesn't jump to her area early. She actually waited in her area and hit the ball out of the other person's racket, and then is late getting over to her area to get the ball. The black 2 just beat her to it. The blue number 2 does about right, except I would have wanted her to see the ball's not in her area. She should pick up the 1 behind her. And the blue number 3 turned in. I'd have preferred she turned all the way around to the back. Okay, the blue number 1 turns toward his area, but he doesn't move toward his area until he sees the ball get kicked out of there, and that causes him to not beat their team to it. The red number 2 turns, the ball doesn't pass her up, so turning in is okay. Doesn't look like she may have been trying to get up to mark somebody up, but doesn't ever get up there. And the number 3 turned out like she should have, and there's probably nothing else she could have done that would have been correct. Okay, the blue number 1, he does turn towards his area again, and again does not move toward his area. Well, the ball wasn't there, so it doesn't matter this time. And I guess you could say he's marking up that player on the Palomino horse, who is the spare player, and he's keeping himself between him and the ball. And sure enough, when everybody else misses it, he's already marked up the other player and gets it with no defense. The red number 2 turns in. That's the only thing she did wrong. She's supposed to mark up the orange player since the ball's not in her area, and the orange player, she got behind him because she turned in. But she does effectively mark him up and keep him from picking up the ball, so she did her job correctly. The red number 3 just is turning out slower than the orange number 3. If you watch that closely a few times, you can see she's only not even a quarter of the way around when the other one is over halfway around. And for some reason, the player on the white horse misses the ball, so the black 3 did her job by causing her to miss the ball. Okay, watch the blue number 1. He doesn't turn to the other team's side, and this time it works out okay for him. It had passed him up, got knocked back to the front to where he happened to be standing. The red number 2 turns out because the ball passed her up, and then it gets knocked back in front of her, which would have been her area, and her number 1 was still there, so that she did okay. The number 3 was turning out and knocked the ball back to her area, and she did okay too.
I'm ready. Ball's in. It's over to the blue side.
Okay, here we'll watch the blue 1. Turns out everybody on the blue team turned out, nobody was on the other side, and still a black player beats them to the ball that's on their own side. And then when she didn't go there, she didn't go to the correct area. She didn't mark anybody up either. The blue number 2 is just slow about getting to that ball, letting the other person beat her, and then she bobbles it and ends up picking it up. They're just lucky that black player had missed it. And the blue number 3 turns out, and I would have preferred that she just turned right back around and looked at that player on the gray horse and picked her up. She's just kind of following the pack.
Lining up on Ryan Strider. The ball comes in. Down on the ground. Everyone's fumbling over it.
Okay, the blue number 1 turns out. In fact, all the blue players turned out. No one went to the other team's side. The ball gets knocked back in, and she doesn't decide if she is first in line for the ball, going all out for it, or if she's marking somebody up. Doesn't actually do anything. The blue number 2 turns out the ball had passed her up, then again it knocks back in front of her, so she also doesn't really have a definitive plan of going for the ball or marking somebody up. And the blue number 3 starts to turn out and then turns back toward the ball to get back into the pack. I would have preferred that she continued all the way around, and if the ball had not been knocked back in front, she just stayed back with that other player.
Time is on. We're adding 5 seconds as well.
This one looks very much like the last one, but the whole blue team turned out. The ball gets knocked back kind of down into the pack, and the blue one kind of went for it, but I wouldn't say she went all out to keep the other player from picking it up. The blue number 2 turns out because the ball had passed her up, then it gets knocked back in front, and she also is kind of hanging out there rather than getting up either to mark somebody up or to go after the ball. Was just kind of hanging around waiting to see, hoping this ball came to her, I guess. And the blue number 3 never turned out. When she turned, she actually ended up turning in, and she also doesn't pick up a player when the ball's not in her area.
Ball's thrown in. Goes out the back. Who's going to be first on it? It's going to be Libby.
Okay, we'll watch the blue number 1. She doesn't go to the other side's area. Nobody on the blue team went to the other team's side. And then she doesn't mark up a player. Blue number 2 turns in, gets behind, and also doesn't mark up a player. And the blue number 3 is way late turning out of this lineup because she turned in, and you can see as she's finally getting her horse turned around, the other horse is already turned around and headed toward the ball in her area and beat them to it easily.
Into a racket. Down on the ground. It was knocked out.
Okay, the blue number 1 turns out. In fact, nobody from the blue team went to the other team's side, and this looks just like those other two where it's just a kind of a mess. And I think it's because the blue team has no plan of what to do, of what areas who is supposed to cover, and they either cover them or mark up a player. And that's kind of goes on the whole time until the other team sees the ball, gets to it, and picks it up because nobody's marking them up. And this is the last clip on this series.